Tocho sambo pa gyu trashi pa Toche tempe tinle yarngoda Pelge drolor zampe ze parche Panden lame shabla solvade Oma Guru Vajradara Suma Timunishas Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajradara Suma Timunish Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajradara Suma Timunisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Om A Guru Vajradara Suma Timunisha Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Om Guru Vajradara Suma Timunisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Alu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Ngan Pakyuke Tugdan Dagi Ten Yerme Chiktu Chingi Alu Makyuke Kudan Dagi Alu Makyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tugdan Dagi Ten Yerme Chiktu Chingi Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Svoha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Svoha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Svoha Sashipeke Choshimeto Tramare Ravalingashi Nide Gempadi Sange Shinto Mikte Ulwarki Drokunam Dashingla Parasho Yidamang Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniryatayami Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapso Che Dage Chinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapso Che Dage Chinso Gibe Sonam Ki drola pinchara sangye drupar sho sangye chodan tsoge chonamla chancho pardo dani kyapso che dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchara sangye drupar sho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Namo yal haye ke da ludan jin ke rubunda da mi ke nam dam drowa kuin ke dhanama che sampa thamche ke to da ge cheten to. Una delle caratteristiche
One of the characteristics in our life,
e anche dopo di essa,
and even after,
ma dell'esistenza in generale,
but regarding existence in general, is that we live in a cyclic reality,
dove abbiamo delle fasi,
where we have phases, we have cycles. Things begin, they end, they start again, and they start in another way, from the macro to the micro cycles of the day, and within a day, there are cycles that are repeated. One moment that's particularly powerful is when one cycle ends and another one is about to begin. And what happens is the following. When I begin a cycle, it's like a reality that arises. And as long as that, until that psychophysical reality or what has arisen, that needs to be used up. It needs to be finished. And once it has actually finished, then I can open up another one. So let me just give you two mundane examples. I have a job, for example. At a certain point, I don't have a job, so I start a job, I start this job, and I start a cycle. And when can I actually start another job? It depends. Let's say a full-time job. If it's a full-time job and I want to do another full-time job, first I need to be able to close that previous one to then open up a new one, or have a relationship with someone. To be able to have a relationship with someone else, one should close that first relationship to open up another one. There are those who try to do differently and they just make a mess. But the healthiest way is to do like that. The real way of doing that would be like this. So what happens is I have a job. So let's say I have a job, and at a certain point that job ends and I don't have a new job. This is called a Bardo. Bardo literally means an intermediate stage. So I finished something, and before I begin something else, so I ended, my job ended, and I haven't started a new one. How many different types of job could I choose? How many possibilities are there now? I could repeat the same type of job. I can decide to change completely and smell and sell sandwiches on the road, or with the little bit of money that I have saved up, um, I I want to do what I like and take this time off. I can choose also to, I can choose to change country. I can do so many different types of things or different types of jobs. Once I choose a new job and then a new cycle begins, then to open up all those other possibilities, what do I need to do? I need to close that cycle. So one of the special characteristics about when a cycle ends before starting another one is that that many possibilities open up before us. And the choices taken in that moment between one cycle and another are very important regarding that new cycle that is going to begin. So I begin a relationship with someone. It's a cycle that opens up. You finish a relationship, and you haven't started a new relationship. There's an infinite, there are infinite possibilities in front of you. And then once you start a new one, then you need to finish that one before you start a new one. Is that clear? So when you begin a psychophysical reality, that needs to end before you start a new one. And that period in between, one ends, and before beginning the next one, that's called the Bardo. And even the Bardo has a beginning and an end. It's a cycle in itself. But a Bardo is explained like this. When you're in the reality of life, within this reality made up a cycle, it's like a great ship in the sea, and to change the direction it's not so easy. But instead, when we're in the Bardo, it said we're like in a small canoe, just one little movement, and we can change our direction. To want something different, just think about it. You can completely change direction easily. That's why those periods of the Bardo are very delicate, because they contain a tremendous amount of possibilities. I need to choose between 4 different things, and that's delicate, because depending on what I choose, it's going to determine what kind of new cycle I am going to live. So Bardo periods should be lived with awareness, remembering, obviously, that there's no perfect choice. Oh, but if I go in that direction, maybe it won't go well for me. Well, surely it won't go well for you. And also the other one, I mean, if we mean to say that if it goes well, that everything's perfect. No, there are pros and cons. We look at the possibilities. We see what we feel at our heart, in our what the reason tells us, and then we start, with a lot of faith, ready to take on the challenge. But that Bardo period should be taken with, it shouldn't be seen as a moment where nothing is happening. The opposite. It's a very, very powerful period and should be taken care of. When we're born, we take a physical body. There's a new cycle that begins. A psychophysical cycle begins. To take a new body, first of all, I need to leave this body. But when this life ends, this space of opportunity opens up, and there's so many possibilities. It's really, really important how I go to live them. Just on a side note, that's more connected to Bardos within our lifetime. When you end a cycle, actually, it's adaptable also to lifetime. When a cycle finishes and we don't accept it and we don't conclude that cycle well, and we remain attached to how it was, wanting that tomorrow be the continuation of what is no longer, the tendency is that we can't open up a new cycle and we remain blocked because we can't recreate what we had, or we create a new cycle strongly conditioned as we had closed the previous one. An example is I close up a job badly. I didn't want to leave that job, but they fired me. I want to go back to that same type of job. Maybe I spend years missing out on opportunities. There's two friends in Brazil, for example. In the book, I talked about these stories. One had he was quite an important director, manager. He had a prestigious condition, and for various reasons that he lost that position, that job. He gave more importance to his inner values, and then he ended up he was without a job. He thought I had a massive career and I had many opportunities, knew how to do lots of things, and lots of time went by. At first he was happy, he could relax, he could travel, do other things after a year, and then 2 years go by and he says, money is running out, what am I going to do? Now it's hard. And then at a certain point, we talked. I said, just do something, doesn't matter what. And he started it wasn't about making a lot of money. It was just to generate a little bit to generate energy. So he started actually taking recycled bottles and making glasses. And he started selling. It started working. It was making really cute. It was really cute. And that started really moving the energy. And a short time afterwards, then he had a job that he had hoped to have before, and everything started flowing well. So sometimes when a cycle ends, if we're too attached to how it was and how it should be, in our opinion, we don't see the opportunities in front of us. When we open up to other opportunities and we move that energy, then things actually can even move in another direction. So what happens is when a cycle ends, it's important to accept that that cycle has ended. Say goodbye. Thank for the good things that came. Learn from it, but understand that it's over. Otherwise, what can happen? Let's give another example. Someone has a relationship, and that relationship ends, and one is stuck and upset, attached to that past relationship, and then this person meets someone, he meets a new person, but projects the same fears from that past relationship onto this new person, or the characteristics of that person onto this new person, and then the time it takes for this new person in the relationship to show that they're not that past person, that maybe that relationship doesn't have any more a chance. So let's remember that one thing is one thing, another thing is another thing. So one thing is one thing. So actually complete, we could say one thing is one thing, one thing is one thing, another thing is another thing. And it's, I mean, they are mutually dependent. So for something to not be something, it has to also not be that other thing. So anyway, when a phase ends, we say goodbye, we thank for that experience, we see that the mistakes that were made, I direct myself to not repeat them, I accept that that cycle has ended, and at this point I open myself up for new opportunities. When someone gets to the end of life and doesn't accept death, and stays very, very attached to this life. And this can happen through two main feelings: attachment or aversion, attraction, aversion. So maybe I know the story, someone, for example, who he had he had built the house of his dreams. And when everything was working perfectly, then he discovered had a strong sickness and died soon after. And he has a beautiful, beautiful house. I remember the house. It was enormous in the middle of the mountains, and then actually it was it was on top of a hilltop of a small mountain actually that was leveled for the house. It had an amazing view. So this person dies, and it was described someone who has a lot of attachment. One can be reborn as a so-called spirit without a body, attached to the previous body, trapped in that place, in this case, in that house. And it happened that Lama Gangchen Rinpoche gave teachings in this house. It's a house within my family, and it's where I spent my childhood years. And there was someone who saw this person, actually saw this person who had deceased, saw this person in the house. So it was my grandfather, actually. Never seen him. And my sister, actually, as a small child, she would see him. And after Rinpoche went there, after Rinpoche was there, no one ever saw him again. And so when this happens, someone can stay trapped in a place. And this, either because there's a lot of hatred or a lot of attachment. Or it's about not allowing for a cycle to end. So you create another cycle that's linked to a previous one. I finish a relationship. I'm not able to accept that it's ended. So I end into a new cycle of non-acceptance of this relationship that hasn't ended. It's a new cycle of non-acceptance. In this case, Lama Gangchen, and what he did, actually, he helped that being close that cycle where that he was trapped in, to allow him to move on. So the Bardo is important, but it's important to understand that you are in the Bardo, that it's finished. Let's go beyond. And generally speaking, this is really important. That has to do not only with death and rebirth, but it has to do with the various phases of our life, various moments, relationships, and work. Our life is made up of these cycles. So the vacation's over. How wonderful that it happened. And to do this well, something that we can do is when a cycle is about to end, or once it has ended, between the end, its conclusion, you can thank for the beautiful things, rejoice for the positive aspects, and see where we can learn from this experience where things didn't go so well. And we close that cycle. So when we die, after death, obviously it's important, maybe before we die, it's important to go through this process. If you have this ability before dying, be thankful for the beautiful things, the people, ask for forgiveness where necessary. It's happened to me, for example, to go see someone who was just very, very sick, very close to death, and would say to me, Lama, there's something I did. I'd like to say I'd like to ask for forgiveness, but I'm not able to get into contact with this person. Can you do it for me? Of course, I said. So we close this cycle. We thank. We're thankful for the beautiful things. We ask for forgiveness where necessary. We're making this commitment to not repeat this kind of actions, and I direct myself towards the future that I want, and I open myself up for new possibilities. It's important to do this before actually dying. So begin gradually. If we were able in our daily life to be thankful for the positive things in our life, to openly admit and see the negative things that we've done, then we're sure that at the end of our life we don't have an infinite number of things to look at, and then we're sure that we're at peace with our own past. After death, we get into the Bardo, this intermediate stage that is conditioned by the way one dies. But within the Bardo, there are various Bardos. There are seven, like 7 dreams within a night. So before you actually have a real rebirth. So it's a very fast reality. Just one thought changes the direction. Any kind of contact changes direction. So it's very important that when someone dies, especially those who have a link with that dying person, generate positive thoughts. So we do this usually through prayer, but try to connect somehow with that person, because one characteristics of the Bardo being is that he or she communicates mind to mind. So not having a physical body anymore, it's beyond the senses. It's mind to mind, one thought. So Bardo beings listen, perceives thoughts. And then a Bardo being also can think of a place and just be there automatically, like a dream, kind of. Like I think Borobudur, and then I'm there. But with a mind, an uncontrolled mind, is very chaotic. If you're not able to control your minds, and you just think about a place and you're there, I mean, that could be really quite tiring. Instead, if you have control over your mind, it could be something marvelous. That's why the Bardo itself is neither good nor bad. It's how it's lived. The way someone lives the Bardo is coherent with the possibility of the births that open up in front of one. If I have a Bardo where I see myself as a human being, I have the probability of a human rebirth. If I have an identity as a human being, then I'll be attracted to human beings. If I have a Bardo within the aspect of an animal, which is also very possible, and I'm attracted to what? If I have a Bardo as a cow, I'm attracted to cows. A mosquito, I'm attracted to mosquitoes. We look around and go, okay. This is the next subject. We'll talk about this topic, the various possibilities in front of us. But the Bardo is... That's why it's really important to create positive links to the Bardo being and do things dedicated to the Bardo being to try to connect, to move that being towards a positive direction. Even if the person died badly, and let's say that there's a high possibility that the Bardo is difficulted, if one is able to interact positively, it's possible to change everything. The Bardo is very fast. The difference between, with regard to the direction, it can change quickly. It says that the life is like the big ship, And instead, in the Bardo, it's like a small canoe where you can change direction easily. So when there's someone who's left this body, it's important during it's when you define those 7 weeks, because every day of a Bardo is should that corresponds to about 7 days for us. So one day in the Bardo is not one day; it's an existence. It's like a dream, and you can have up to 7. So for us, that would correspond to 49 days. And here there are lots of debates on this because time is relative. Because if I enter in the Bardo as a deva, as a god realm being, are they those 7 days? Are they Bardo days or human days or deva days? Theoretically, it should be my worldview comes from the view of a deva, which is much longer. A day for a deva is much longer than for a human being. That's why when we talk about the Buddhist cosmology, there's a kind of table. I need to bring it one day. There are the various possibilities of rebirth according to time. If we look at the scientific ways of physics today, we see that time is absolutely relative, and it's strongly linked to the gravitational force. So depending on the strength of the gravitational force, time actually passes differently. So the difference that we can feel is if you're at sea level or if you're in the mountains, like 4,000 meters of a difference. And I don't think that you spend a lot of time at 7,000 meters, but for a while at 3,000 meters. But time actually is different depending on that gravitational pull. So at sea level or in the mountains, and in the cosmology, the Buddhist cosmology, the different realms of existence, time corresponds to these different realms of existence. So Bardo can last 1 second, or can last. We use as a reference our time, which is 49 days, but it's just an indication. It's not something scientific. Okay, now I look at the time on my watch, and now Bardo's finished. We can't use only our own reference point. But if someone wants to calculate the 7 days using the 7 days using the longest time reference possible, for that would be generations, not just 7 weeks. So 7 weeks, because every 7 days of hours corresponds to one quote-unquote day, which is a lifetime, one bardo. After that finishes, one has a small bardo and then starts again. And this can happen up to 7 times. At a certain point, one sees that possibility, appearance of the next life. And there's some texts say that the bardo being sees the father and the mother, and attraction to one and aversion to one arises. So if attraction to the father arises, the being is born as a female, and vice versa. But other texts, for example, in the Guhya Samadra, they don't have the attraction to the mother and the father, but towards actually the essence. So the ovum and the sperm, that the substance that the father and the mother bring. And so, well, how then can you have how can there be in vitro fertilization, for example? In Guya Madrid, explained by Lama Tsongkhapa, says that the Bardo being is attracted not to the father or the mother, but to the actual substances. It's like a visceral attraction and directed to that energy. So that explains how this white bodhicitta, red bodhicitta, which is nothing other than the ovum and the sperm, what actually creates a new human, a new being. It said that that Bardo being goes with all strength and goes right towards it, and then there's another like dissolution, and then the rebirth process. So it explains the in vitro fertilization. So the Bardo being in the Bardo there's nothing that stops it. He then becomes trapped in this indestructible drop, which is the union of the ovum and the sperm. And from there, goes the clear light, black near attainment, red vision, white vision, and then the 5 elements that arise. And there's the whole detailed process of the rebirth process. It's one of the great moments, a part of pride for Tibetan medicine. When we look at the Tantra, there's an incredibly detailed explanation of the rebirth process from conception through to the fetus and to birth. I mean, these are texts that are at least 1,000 years old, and the description of the birth process and the fetal development process that is incredibly accurate, and even the drawings that we can see, actually images. So these even the drawings that Western doctors have been able to see and comment, they say that it came at least 200 years before Western medicine knew about these things. So then the subtle the subtle body, it develops first, the central channel, and the non-conceptual mind arises, and then and without getting into all the details, but it's the conceptual mind that develops last, the course mind. What's important for us now is, one, we should have an idea more or less of how it happens. As I said, is that at the beginning, this is information in Buddhist texts. It's very detailed. There are very detailed explanations. My own experience that I can share is that as a child, I've always been convinced of reincarnation, and following also logic. It's much more clear that there's something before birth and that there's something after death. I mean, it answers a lot of questions, but at the end of the day, what really matters is how we live our lives today and how we die. If we live well and die well, we don't need to worry about the Bardo. But if we have a view of how the Bardo works, that allows us also this also can help us for those who have left their body. There's this communication, mind to mind. I communicate with you, you receive my thought. If I have virtuous thoughts and you can connect to those virtuous thoughts, that will help you. So that's why it's important during the Bardo period to connect virtuously, positively to the person who's left his or her body. This is really important. There was something else I wanted to say. Anyway.
Esiste anche una cosa che io ho sperimentato.
There's also something that I've experienced very clearly. When someone dies, there's a period where you, where you really feel that person's presence, and then at a certain point, you just don't feel it anymore. And it's interesting when that comes. It's really interesting. Several people can feel that same thing. With Lama Gangchen Rinpoche, that was incredibly clear. What does that mean? One meaning is that at a certain point, that being who's left his body is present, even is present nearby, even without that body. But then when it's no longer present, it's leaving and there's a new road ahead. But there's something interesting. If I knew someone who then dies, at a certain point, that person is reborn, dies again, is reborn. Thinking about that person that I knew, I'm creating a link with that person, regardless of the life regardless of the life that person takes. There is that connection. This means that when I think about my grandfather Roberto, wherever he is today, that name, that memory, whatever that bridge is that allows me to connect with that being, regardless of where he is. We can get into details on this. The logic to understand this better is the system that I've explained before about this commitment being and wisdom being. And this, for me, is something particularly important. So we say, oh, does it make sense that I pray for the person who died 30 years ago? There's something very practical here. There's this idea that when someone dies, you shouldn't touch the person's body. And often people ask about donating organs. So what happens? If I prepare myself to be aware of my death for my whole life, and I'm able to meditate in the clear light in a state of love and wisdom, and I'm able to do it, and then they come and they take my heart or whatever organ, then I miss that opportunity. If someone has a level of spiritual preparation and one knows that they can take advantage of that opportunity, at that point it's better not to be an organ donor. If you know that you don't have that ability, you try to die with a positive mind, and being an organ donor. That's wonderful. It's an it's an act of generosity. It's very, very important, and that creates positive karma that's going to help me after my death. So the answer to should one be an organ donor or not? Well, it depends. It depends mostly on whether one has prepared himself enough to actually meditate on the dying process in the clear light or not. And only we can answer that question for ourselves. So what about touching the body? And the same thing. It's said that when someone dies, the very subtle mind physically leaves from one part or another of the body. And it's better if it comes from the mouth or from the fontanella. So normally it'd be better to touch one's head to induce the very subtle mind to leave the body. But here too, I mean, when somebody's dying after someone's died, they don't feel anything. So that's not going to determine where the very subtle mind and body leaves. It's not that nothing's going to happen if someone touches the feet of someone who's died. Just to put a little bit, give a little clarity to this. Sometimes people feel anxious about this. So that person, is not going to experience anything for which has not created the causes and conditions. One should not touch the body until one is completely dead, until after the subtle death process. So if that if you can see that the body is pale, is starting to decompose, it means that the person, that death process has concluded. 3 days is a concept, because in different texts it's said that that death process can last 3 days, but from the dissolution of the earth. So, and it really depends on the sickness from which that person died, and the medicine the person was taking. There's so many things. Let's tell the truth. How many people die from natural causes? I had 2 great grandmothers who lived 101, 103, and they just stopped breathing. But normally we push with medicine, and that changes the time of the dissolution, the length of time for the dissolution of the elements, or maybe one phase can last longer, one lasts less. It's not the same for everyone. So don't. There's no worry about touching the body once the person has completely died. But something I've seen. I've seen people get in kind of a hurry, though, and no, when we're near someone who dies, it's a moment of great intimacy. It's a moment to talk to that person, mind to mind, heart to heart, to make prayers, generate a state of peace. That's a very, very important. And then you do what you need to do. You call the, call the cremation company or whatever it is, the funeral company. So we should. So once that process is completely finished, then we can begin that process of preparing the body, just on a very practical level, because it's such an important moment. And it's true that we will all die, but it's true that the people that we know will also die, family members, friends, our parents. Everyone who's born will die. And a really important part of life is learning how gradually, little by little, with experience, learn how to face death in a healthy way. Not only our own, but also other people's death. The first time that I had someone close to me die, I was very young. I was 3 years old. That's another story. But the one that really touched me, I was 14 years old. It was one of my masters, NgalSo Rinpoche. He's the abbot of Tashilhunpa in India, one of the most marvelous people that I ever met. It was also a master of Lama Gangchen Rinpoche, and Lama Gangchen had entrusted me to him, and he was really, it's hard to say the highest level of generosity, but he's like among one of those that had the greatest level of generosity, Dharma knowledge, and for example, when the Dalai Lama would speak and all the abbots of the great monasteries, there were many, many who had very important situations or their prestigious positions in society, or the masters would arrive with their entourage of disciples. He would come, with kind of old clothes, with his jola, and just walk in there, and everyone would just open up in front of him, giving him space. I mean, he had a connection, a practice, was very, very lucky. I had the great fortune of receiving the very, very first lessons of dialectics from him, even if he had a very advanced level of knowledge, because he was very close to Lama Gangchen. So I had many expectations, things I wanted to learn from him, and at a certain point, he was in a very difficult situation where he was in a condition, in a situation where he was forced, let's say, he needed to make a decision between one thing and another, and both decisions went against his most basic fundamental principles, and in both decisions required going against his gurus. I understood this all after, and so he was called to go on a trip. He had to go, and then he needed to make this decision that really went against his principles. And during the trip, he had a very high fever and he died. In my opinion, it's not that he took his life, but he saw that he was in this very difficult situation, and he made it so that he didn't need to go against his principles. Like stories, for example, there's a beautiful story. It's very long, which says, I didn't lie for lifetimes, and it's not for one lifetime that I'm going to lie. So he always maintained this very, very pure relationship with his gurus, and it's not for one lifetime that he's going to break that. That's my interpretation. So anyway, I was there, and I remember at the time we didn't have cell phones. There was one phone, who knows where. At a certain point, I received a letter that said that he had left his body. There was a couple of days after it had happened, and I remember that moment.
Di shock.
I was shocked. He was quite old, but the perception that I had was, it was at the beginning of my path, and that I was waiting to spend years with him, close to him. And the first thing that comes is sadness. There's a strong emotion, or the feeling of why, well, what happened, what happened. And right away after, I remember I started crying, and then I asked myself why I was so sad. I was so moved because he was important to me, because he gave me so much, and what he gave me continues with me. And I started thanking for all the things that he had transmitted to me, and for that great benefit of being close to him. And I'm so thankful even today.
E quello fa tramutare.
So we change. I mean, the emotion doesn't leave us. You can feel it, but but this deep sense of gratitude wins over the sadness. Like when Lama Michel Rinpoche left his body, and it was in the middle of COVID. We couldn't meet so many, but there were some who were present, some online, and what I said at the time, I said, we're not, and I believe it, I still believe it, we gather not in sadness, but in gratitude. When something beautiful ends, transforms, the healthiest way is to not suffer for what is no longer there, but feel grateful for what has been.
Ok? Quindi qualunque
So
persona che abbiamo nella nostra
any person that we have in our lives,
o loro prima o insieme,
so
non c'è
we're
un'alternativa.
either they're gonna die
E la probabilità è che ci saranno più persone nell'arco della nostra vita che moriranno prima di noi.
that maybe they die before us or we die together. Um, we won't.
Riuscire a vivere al meglio i momenti che ci sono.
So it's just really important to live these experiences, to live this relationship well,
Vivere al meglio i momenti.
live the moments well with love, with trust. Try to clean our past. Cleaning our past doesn't mean that even the other needs to do so and accept that. I don't need to. I don't need to ask forgiveness to you, and if you don't forgive me, it doesn't work. No, on my side, I need to keep my side of the street clean. And on your side, it is better for you if you also grant me forgiveness. But on my side, I do only what I can. So, if someone close to us leaves his or her body, it's important to be at peace with that person. That's the first thing. And there's time afterwards as well, but it's much better if it happens before. So live that moment the best way possible. After someone's death, something that's important to do is to thank for the beautiful things that were, for what we received. That's why normally when someone dies, what I try to do, personally speaking, and I try to invite others to do, my advice is to do three things. For someone who's just died, for someone who passed away a long time before, these three things we can do by ourselves. We can do them in a group, in silence, or actually verbalizing. We can do this out loud. The first point is remembering something beautiful and thanking that person for that positive aspect of this person, and I feel grateful. And when I think of this Rinpoche, I have so many beautiful memories. I remember, for example, the abbot in India. He was teaching, and I was seated on the floor. He was on the bed teaching. There was sun behind him, and he was teaching by having me repeat things. The first thing, which means kansagita. It's well, at the time I didn't understand anything. It's so profound. The identity, the objective, the intrinsic identity of self cannot be perceived by a correct, a valid mind. This is the definition of the lack of the lack of intrinsic identity of the self. The things and from that valid mind come the things that exist and the things that don't exist, and then there were all the definitions of phenomena. And one day I was there in front of him, and I asked him, because I saw he was there with the table in front of him, his implements, the bumpa was there, and it was a very sunny day, and there was this shadow of his objects and his own shadow. It almost felt like it was like a shadow of a glass. It was very subtle and light compared to also the solid objects. And I said, Rinpoche, I heard that you don't have a shadow, which is also, this is also one of the signs of someone who is of a great realization of a spiritual realization of realizing the illusory body. I said, I was a child, and I said to him, I, I was a child. I said, so this very faint shadow of yours, is that a sign of this? And he didn't say yes or no. He looked at me with a smile. It was just so many beautiful memories I have of him. So that first step is to remember something positive and be thankful. The second moment, generate a thought now for that person who's left his or her body. So wherever that person is, what do I want for that person now? Allow ourselves to connect with that person beyond the way you knew them. That person doesn't exist anymore with that body, with that name, or for that person, for an animal, for that being. I desire that you're in peace, that you're in a healthy place. What do I want for this being? Try to verbalize this and desire this, and verbalize this desire. The third very important point, and it's normal that there would be sadness or emotions, or, when someone leaves his body. When I think about Lama Gangchen, I'm with so much gratitude, but I'm moved. It's normal that there are emotions, also some sadness, but these emotions should be directed. If one lives this sadness, one can wallow in this sadness, but one should take a commitment to do something virtuous and concrete. I will plant a tree. I will help this person. I will help a hospital. I'll help the Dharma center. I'll meditate. I'll stop smoking. Regardless of what we do, we do something positive dedicated to that person. And what happens is, once I'm able to do that action that I committed to do, and I create this positive karmic force, what pushed me to do that comes from the person who's no longer there. So a part of that positive karmic force is dedicated. A part of that goes towards that being, and it's also a way to not stay blocked, just to continue to get the energy also flowing, where we acknowledge our feelings, but we're not blocked in the sadness. This has helped me. I've used this, and this has helped me at the loss of many people near me. If we're near someone who is dying, what should we do? First of all, we should try to be present with serenity, with love. Try to make sure that our presence is a presence that transmits something virtuous and positive, something that that person can feel. I've been close to people who are about to die. I mean, you don't know what to say. It's not a time for philosophical discussions. You don't have to say that much. Sometimes there are things that you can say, but mostly what I've always seen and what's worked the most, just being there with love is enough. You hold hands, you're close to the person in silence, with love, with sincere love, in a state of in a balanced and loving state, if I can generate this state of love and balance when I'm close to that person, that helps that person also generate that same state.
Se noi riusciamo
If we're able to stay longer, we can help that person connect with his or her object of faith, Jesus or God or Buddha, his own guru, her own guru. But I help somehow that person connect with his or her object of faith. That helps that person generate a deeper state of consciousness of love and balance and faith. And if possible, one can accompany that person, thanking for what they've had, when they openly admit their mistakes and ask for forgiveness, accept their own death. And very often, the one who's dying, even though we don't talk about it because it's an enormous taboo, but the person knows best what's happening. And it's really beautiful to see someone die well. At least I've had the great honor of seeing it many times. Unfortunately, I've seen the opposite. But how can we know if the person has died well or not? One way to do this is when we're physically where the person died, you can feel the energy in the air. There are times, unfortunately, I've lived also this, where there's a heavy, dense area where you could cut it with a knife, and that's not a good sign. That's a sign that the person didn't die well, that's not well. And in these cases, it's time to do a lot, recite many prayers to change the energy, change the direction of the person. Other times where you feel in the air this sense of harmony and peace and lightness. Here in Albagnano, we had Teresa Turicchia. Many of you knew her. And Teresa, she was, for example, when we do self-healing, there's the mantra at the beginning, Om Guru Sumati Muni Shasane Karma. She is the one who wrote this melody. She was a harp teacher, and at the beginning of Italian television, when there was this interval in TV, and there was this fixed image of the harp. That was her, the one who played the harp. I mean, she was a wonderful person, but she was also difficult. She was a kleptomaniac, and she lived at the center for many years. And even Milan, she had her house actually in Milan, but she lived at the center 24/7 in Milan. Just one of these nice stories. When Lama Gangchen lived in Milan, in the whole house there was only one bathroom, and she had her own house, but she was there for 24 hours a day. And sometimes Lama Gangchen would go into the bathroom, and she would be there, be sitting on the toilet, and she'd be sleeping, or she would do the washing machines, run the washing machine at night, and she also stopped thieves there at the center. One night, she heard that they were trying to break the door of the kumpen, the door of the gompa, and then she opened the door. She opened the window from above, and she said, excuse me, the center's closed. We opened, and then they ran away. And And uh, and then another time too, she opened the window and she poked at them through the window and said, "Who's there?" And they got scared and ran away. She was kind of a protector, and she had a particular character. She was a kleptomaniac. When something went missing, we always went to look at her house, and she had a collection of umbrellas and coffee cups. I mean, so many things. When we were making the tattoo wall, for example, one boy who came to help at a certain point, he couldn't find his AC/DC T-shirt. And then the next day, there was this like T-shirt. There was Teresa wearing this AC/DC T-shirt. So that was one side of her. And then she would just like speak in loop about many things. But she also had many qualities. And one master in particular told me, take care of her very well, because she takes away interferences. So, in many cases, sometimes we needed to blame someone. And so in our community, somehow she absorbed these interferences. When something would happen, we'd say, "Oh, it was Teresa." The day she died, actually, here in Albagnano, first of all, the ceiling of the temple fell down. Before this ceiling, an actual ceiling, there was another one. And the day she died, the ceiling came down. I can give you technical explanations for it too. Anyway, we fixed it. This is a different ceiling. And I went to see her after she died, a little bit before and then afterwards. And I remember I went into her room, and it was a magical feeling, this feeling of peace and harmony. I went there and I wanted to stay. This is a sign of someone who has died well. Instead, I've had sensations where I've gone where someone has died, and you enter and you just want to run away. And in those cases, you need to stay, recite prayers, and help the Bardo being. But how can we know if the person has died well or not? You also just see how the room is. How is that space? It's really quite subjective, but it's also very strong. And also the facial expressions of the person. Some people, when they die, they have a harmonious face. Sometimes even see joyous, or even the opposite. This is for us, to see if we can have a perception. I mean, if somebody has died well, we don't need to worry. We do our prayers anyway. But when we see that there are indications that the person has died badly, then we need to do more to help them. So prayers are done with the mind more than with the words. It's the intention that we generate. And of course, there are all the mantras and the different practices. But we need to adapt ourselves to the mentality of that person. If I have my Buddhist practices, if I have so we should never try to get someone to recite Buddhist prayers or accept Buddhist prayers if they weren't Buddhist. Try instead to induce as much as possible into that person into a state of love and trust and peace. So it's a whole science, how to accompany someone. But the essence is that person, we help that person be at peace with his own life and help that person move on. Even if we live in a context where death is a taboo, where we can't talk about it. It's hidden. We hide it from children, and you give them video games, and they're killing and non-stop. So if we live in a reality where we're hiding, even in a hospital, somebody dies, they whisk that body away immediately. It's hidden. Each one of us, we all have the ability to break this taboo and to live death with more naturally. There's nothing wrong with this. It's something beautiful. It's one of the it's one of the most sure things. Our own and the death of others, our own death and the death of others. And if someone says, "Oh, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do this, that, or the other when I die," I can assure you that in most of the cases, none of us is ready for death. Ready in the sense that indifferent. No, I'm going to die, but that's fine. No, there are emotions. There's a part of pain that can come. Except for me, my test is when Lama Gangchen left his body. And one of the most beautiful moments is when I was in the hospital with him, because there was this small miracle that in the middle of the height of COVID, the actual the doctor called and said, "Now come. Now's the time to come." I don't know how many days, but there were a few of us, and we never left him. And there were some times when I was together with him, he was absolutely aware that this was the end of his life. And then sometimes people say, "Oh, Rinpoche, no, there's still a good possibility that you're going to do this, and you're good." And he would say, "I know my body," and that was it, and that's fine. Absolutely in peace. Never showed to be afraid. He's always sitting with his legs crossed, and sometimes sometimes he would lie down, just to placate us. We would say, "No, rest, rest," but then then we would turn around and he'd be sitting up again. He had the image of his guru, Kyabshe Chidam Rinpoche, in front of him. And I remember this one day, a few days before he left his body, I was there together with him. And I had this deep sensation, this deep feeling of gratitude. But at the same time, there was nothing more that I needed to ask him. There was nothing. I had no more expectations of needing to receive anything from him, and it was a beautiful feeling. Also something. So it was a very strong moment. Still is. The last things he said was, the only thing I have to say to everyone is thank you. It's obvious that we miss him. But there's a deep, deep sense of gratitude. And there's no feeling of defeat or any feeling of being wronged or being some kind of victim. Why did he die? He shouldn't have died. He didn't have these feelings. And from my good fortune, I never felt that. Instead, there was a great feeling of gratitude. Part of life. We were born, and then we live and we die. This is for me. It's the same for everyone, and it's very important for us to live not just on a conceptual level, but from our experience, from the most important people in our lives, to to see that there's nothing wrong in dying.
Okay. Questo non vuol dire
This doesn't mean that there aren't emotions or that there's that we don't miss this person. It's obvious that that's true, but if we can accept that there's nothing wrong with dying, and we unite that with a sense of gratitude. When I think of Lama Gangchen Rinpoche, I feel only joy. Obvious. When you remember certain moments, one reconnects. Reconnects certain emotions. Obviously, we feel this this missing, but there's a deep sense of gratitude, joy to have had this enormous gratitude, this enormous possibility of being close to him, close to my guru. So when we allow ourselves to live death naturally naturally, and I repeat once again, there's nothing wrong with dying. Our own death, and also the death of someone else beyond age. Sometimes people say, oh, if Lama Gangchen had lived a few more years, he would have seen the temple finished. I remember when we made the inauguration of the last floor of the temple, and I asked him, and he did the blessing of the sacred parts of the temple, and I remember asking him some specific questions about the temple. He said, "Oh, you decide. Anyway, there's time. I won't be here to see that." And then Tarchin, the attendant of Children Rinpoche in the United States, he said to me, "Well, in the end, it doesn't matter how many years Lama Gangchen lived. For us, it would have never been enough." 80. He lived to 80, maybe 80, 100, 120. It's never enough because we don't want to be separated from him. But we start from this fundamental principle that it's not a defeat, it's not the victim of death. Nothing wrong, nothing bad happened. The problem is not dying, the problem is living badly. And in my case, I'm lucky I lived it very well. I saw that, and he lived it well. It's important to bring normalcy to dying. To be able to speak about it openly, to face it openly. This is a great, great gift that we give to ourselves. In our society, we have certain widespread taboos, and one of those is death. And there's also money and sex. These taboos that are really quite widespread. And among the taboo of death, I think, is the most widespread. So in conclusion, I want to remind everyone to put effort, invest an important part of our energy in generating this normalcy with death, to be at peace with death. Death, our death, and others' death. Our parents, our children, our spouses, sooner or later, we're all going to die. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when we pretend that death doesn't exist, when we create a kind of storyline where we say we can never accept it, we'll be too sad about it, and we repeat that narrative, that storyline again and again. Oh, you know, when that person dies, I'll never accept it. I'll never be able to overcome that. The more we repeat that, the 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 more real that becomes. So if I'm really afraid of your death, then I really need to put effort into living this life very as well as possible, and make the most of every moment. And so let's try to bring this the awareness of our own mortality to our own daily life, that we're here today, and at some point it's not going to be like this, and that's fine, but we need to take advantage of the essence of this, and we don't know when the conditions will change, or when our death will come. In this life, I've lived situations that I have never expected. Unexpected deaths that I never would have expected.
Una persona a cui volevo dedicare si chiamava Elika in Brasile. Era una
This girl, a disciple of Lama Michel Rinpoche, a Brazilian young girl. She died a few days ago. She was at the one of she was in a wonderful period of her life. Her beautiful children, a little bit complicated, and everything was stabilized. She had a good relationship, materially speaking. And materially speaking, everything was going well. And, you know, everything was going very, very well for her finally. And then this was actually 20 years ago when everything finally was going well. And then she had a stroke, and she survived the stroke, but she was never the same, and she died just a few days ago. So we never know what can happen and when. In her case, it was actually the sickness of the stroke that was the heaviest, and it was so dramatic. I've seen very slow deaths, fast deaths, and there are those who are sure that they're about to die, and then years go by. Instead,
noi non sappiamo.
We don't know.
Questo è qualcosa che dobbiamo riportare con consapevolezza,
And this is something we need to be aware of this, to bring awareness. Like, sorry if I'm just drilling this. So we can't pretend. We can't be indifferent. Oh, today we talked about death. Oh, I like it, I don't like it. Let's just move on. We need really to let it move something inside. For some, it's easier. For some, more difficult. Well, regardless of whether it's easy or difficult for you, we need to be able to face our own mortality and, as a consequence, the mortality of others. But let's start with ourselves. I will die, and I need to live my life well. And we reorganize our priorities. We reprioritize things.
Non dico tutti i giorni, per una volta alla settimana.
I don't mean every day, but at least once a week or at least once a month. Ask ourselves with sincerity, if I were to die today, if I were to die now, am I living the life that I want to live? If yes, then good. If no, and I don't mean, oh, but not the kind of life, oh, I'd like to to not work, and live conditions that I don't have. No, am I living the life with my behavior, the choices that I make, the choices that I'm making? Am I creating the life that I want to be living? So the positive things that we see are working for us, yes, continue. And what's not, then make the changes. So we need to review sometimes, and that helps us have a good direction. This gives us the strength in our spiritual practice. So don't take life for granted. Not ours, not others, and the opportunities that we have. We have them today. We don't know if we'll have them tomorrow. Let's try to give our best. And I'd like to just add an important point. When we talk about giving our best, it doesn't mean that we have to be the best. I need to direct myself to be what I want, but never impose upon myself to already be the best. I can put a tremendous amount of effort into getting angry less and being more patient, but not impose upon myself the idea that I already need to be patient.
Okay.
So we set our objective, we give ourselves a direction, we walk in that direction, and we respect the length of our own legs and our own time, our own abilities, but set the direction with constancy. As we said at the very beginning of this topic, I talked about that an action, like a military action, makes sense only if it's it makes sense only if it is if it corresponds to a higher objective. We're talking about a country and their needs, their desires. But for our own life, what we do makes sense only if it corresponds to a higher objective for ourselves. So what we live in our daily life becomes actions that are at the service of our highest objective, and what's worth being a higher objective is inner peace and developing love, so that we can then help others do the same. This is our highest objective. So our family is important, yes. Relationships are important, yes. A husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, children, grandparents, everybody's very important. I don't mean to take away anyone's importance. Work's important, vacations are important. Okay? The house is important. So
in mezzo a tutto
in the middle of all this, there's something even more important. The way in which we the way that we live, and as a consequence, the way that we transform ourselves. Am I satisfied or dissatisfied? The way that we live is the way that we transform ourselves, and that's the direction that we give ourselves. In other words, let's fall in love with inner peace. Let's give ourselves this direction, and everything else exists as at the service of that objective. When I think of Gangchen Rinpoche, he decided to die instead of going against his fundamental principles, and he didn't kill himself. It wasn't suicide, which would require taking something external, something external to take away one life. But instead, he did this with his own mind, and he was able to choose the time of his own death. There's a nice story about this. I'll just tell you quickly. There was one Kyabche Rinpoche, who was a master also of Lama Gangchen Rinpoche. If you see over there, there's Trisha Rinpoche, and looking to our right, there's a white window. The first image on that side over there, there's the white window. There's the image of a Buddha Vairochana, and above there are 5 images, representations. The first that goes towards the center now, he has this kind of goatee, white goatee. That's the representation of Kyabche Rinpoche. So one day, Son Rinpoche received a letter.
Era già abbastanza anziano.
He was already quite elderly at the time. He received a letter from his attendant, Tenzin Wanchuk, and he started reading it to him. So in Tibetan, when you write to someone, it's incredibly formal. I had this book when I lived in India. It was really so if you want to write to a friend, to a professor, to your master, to the president, depending on the position, there's the introduction of the letter. Sometimes it's 3 pages long or half a page, but I mean, less than half a page doesn't exist. You don't say, "Dear Lama," there's "You, who's my best friend." I mean, there's a whole poetry in the middle. That's why I had this book when I was in India. I don't know where it is anymore. And when you write without this, it's not respectful. It's very direct. It's like it could even be rude. So Tso Rinpoche received a letter, and his attendant was going to read it, and it was written very directly, and there wasn't even the honorary. It wasn't even Tso Rinpoche or his holy Rinpoche. It was actually written his name, not just Tso Rinpoche. So it was written actually his name that wasn't used. Like Lama Gangchen was Lobsang Tupten Chinayarpel, but nobody wrote to him or spoke to him like that. And then so he read this letter, and it was signed like Lobsang Yeshe, and he starts yelling, and actually it was his guru who was the essence of the letter was that Tso Rinpoche had written to him a letter, and Tso Rinpoche had written this letter saying, I'm old. I've already reached a certain age. I'm tired. And Kyabche Rinpoche answered him like, how do you allow yourself to? You don't have the permission to die. And a few years later, he left his body. Actually, Trisha Rinpoche left his body, and then Tso Rinpoche went, and he liked these technological things, and he even in India was able to buy these cassette players that were these long stereos with the cassettes. So he had one of these, and he had recorded, for example, he had recorded the holy instruments, these kinds of clarinets, this claling, and also the plates, and so sometimes he would do certain practices and he was alone, and he would just play also all of these musical instruments. You know, he was very practical for certain things, so he was using this. And so he recorded his will one day. He told a little bit before that, he had been to New York. He had gone to a toy store. There was this beautiful toy store in New York. He bought tons of gifts. People looked at him like, "Oh, what are you doing?" He said, "No, soon I'm going to die, and no one will buy toys for me. So I'm already buying it for myself." So that day, he recorded his will, and his last will and testament, giving all the indications. He went to the stupa of his guru, Kyabche Chichen Rinpoche. So we're talking about Son Rinpoche. And then he sat down in meditation and he died. And he stayed in that meditative state, that clear light, for a long time. And this, to show you that these people, there are people who know how to recognize their the time of their death. They say the function of this body is finished. I mean, some people say, okay, now it's time to sleep. I'm going to sleep. And some people can't even manage that these days. But there are people also say, oh, now it's my time to die, and now I'm going to die. It's important to know this. So I've been to the house of Son Rinpoche, his reincarnation, and all the toys that he had bought for himself, just to say that when the moment comes, whether you're aware of it or not. But the most important thing is how we relate to that reality. And something beautiful is that if each one of us is able to change one's own way of relating to death, and let's be truthful, among all the things that we know, among all of the people that we know, all of the relationships we have. I mean, think of all the people you know. Who takes 2 days just to talk about death? I mean, a lot of people would just look at us and think that we're crazy. But actually, if each one of us is able, in his own reality, to change the relationship with death in a healthy way, and there's nothing wrong with dying, and one can learn to prepare oneself for death, and as a consequence, live in a more healthy way, then we're actually changing our culture, whether we want to or not. Because culture, the Italian culture, is made up of the culture of the Italian people. And when more people change their view of something, that changes the general view. So it doesn't stay only with us. What happens inside of each one of us determines also what the future generations are going to experience and become. And we influence each other. So I invite you to be sincere, to work hard. It takes time. It's not easy. But with constancy, work hard on creating familiarity and being at peace with death, with our own and the death of others. generating a deep, deep sense of urgency. It's an urgency that tells us that we don't have time to lose. There's no time to just be stuck in a loop, or we need to live our life to the fullest in a coherent way, in a virtuous way, in a healthy way. This is important. The next step of the Lam Rim that we will see has to do with, okay, now that I know that I'm going to die, so what possibilities do I have now? Because in Buddhism, there's not a... I can try to be nice about this. It's not like a pink version of okay, when you die, everything's going to go fine. That's not a given. We don't need a version of reality, like a pleasurable version of reality. We need a version of reality that is coherent. The truth, not what is comfortable. I mean, it's much easier if I say, "Oh, don't worry, just do this, recite this mantra every day, and after death, everything will be fine." It's much easier to give tell everyone that everything will be fine, and have this idealized view that everything is going to be fine. Unfortunately, that's not true. And if I have a coherent view of what's going to happen after the death, then I will be sure that I work accordingly, depending on what I want, and I really take the reins of my life in my own hands and work accordingly and live a virtuous life. We've talked about this many times. But when we talk about the possibilities of the possible rebirths, we need to prepare ourselves, in the sense we need to take care to ensure the best, not prepare ourselves for the worst. And I don't mean to scare anyone, but we need to be realistic. And that's why the next step is about understanding the possible rebirths, so that we cultivate the mind of not wanting to have an inferior rebirth. And then we get into the law of karma, and the taking of refuge, and then the next steps that come. What's really beautiful is that we have in our hands a path that we can follow step by step. Okay, no, Lama, just don't leave us here with death. No, I'm going to leave you here with the death, and then we'll look at the next steps. We don't need to jump to the next floor. Let's allow ourselves to familiarize ourselves with this very important step, and then we'll get to the next one, little by little, the next one after that. I thank you to be together to look at this topic that I personally really like, but it's not that easy. And the fact that we're here together, that really creates this possibility of being able to have this moment and to talk about this, and to get out of our daily habits, our daily automatic reactions. And I invite you, when you go home today, or if you're here, or when you go to bed, don't take for granted that we're here the opportunities we have, the people close to us. be thankful for the beautiful things we have. Look at yourself in the eyes with sincerity and tell yourself to stop being stupid and to stop doing things that are not beneficial. We don't have time to waste. I mean, let's tell the truth. We do stupid things sometimes. Let's try to live in a sincere, coherent way with joy. Because at the end, there's a lot of joy that we live in this context. We're so lucky, such positive conditions. I mean, the more we think about death, I mean, that takes us to how precious this life is. It would be very different if we, if we started from, oh, how terrible life is, then at that point, death, let it come. It would free us from, there are philosophical views that see the body as something that is trapped, that is trapping one's being, and death is the freedom. Instead, the view that we have is we have precious, unique conditions, powerful conditions to transform ourselves in a positive way. How wonderful is that? And because we have this marvelous conditions, because we have these marvelous conditions, we can't waste time. Because our mortality is imminent, and so that awareness shows us that every meeting, every thought, every moment is precious. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm very attached to life, but life is somewhere. I love life, but life is somewhere." No, life is every moment. At the moment they're scrolling. And hours, infinite hours. I'm in deep samadhi. He's scrolling on my phone. He's just this solitary.
La vita si consuma. La vita è lì, eh?
Single point concentration on these videos. Okay, that's life too. If I get angry, or I'm full of jealousy, or if I create problems, that's life too, and I'm using up my life there. So life is in every moment, every meeting, and every thought, in every word, every choice. So let's try to live every moment, recognizing the preciousness of this life. Have taken choices. I've made choices. I'm very happy with them. But it's interesting. There are times of our life where similar things happen, and even if they're not connected, but now I'm living a moment that's particularly. I've always had a life where everyone was very nice to me, but recently there's a moment of opposition that goes beyond, it's outside the context of our center, but situations of opposition and aggression towards me. But what's something beautiful is I can choose with awareness to follow or not. You can fight with me, but if I choose not to fight with you, that's my freedom. You can hate me, but and then I can choose to, I can choose how I want to feel about you, and I choose to love you. This is one of the most beautiful things that we have. And why am I talking about this? Because life is in every moment, and there are beautiful moments and difficult moments, and that's where we have the choice of how we want to live our life. And we have this choice of giving our life a healthy direction. We don't have time to waste with resentment and anger. It's important to be virtuous and loving and coherent and healthy.
E la cosa bella è che a me mi dà tanta
And
gioia
loving something that gives me a lot of joy is that it's possible. We have this freedom. We can actually do this.
quindi quando noi
So when we have someone in our lives or someone in society, public figures who have some kind of behavior that we don't agree with, that we're against, where there's violence and aggression, if we're being attached, we can defend ourselves. We can get out of the situation, but not get in, not continue that cycle of negativity, of violence and aggression and hatred.
adesso dilungo
And I don't want to open this topic now, but it's one way to make our life meaningful. I say to myself, I don't want to get into a fight or any kind of quarrel because soon I'm going to die. Why in the world would I do that? I mean, why would I want to put so much energy? I put so much energy into cultivating a mind of peace. You can do what you want. You think that I'm going to give that up for this? To react? And it's important for us to have this conviction, this strength, this inner strength. Why am I saying this? Because for each one of us, there are moments in our life where there's conflict or tension, but how we live our life is our own choice. And we have the possibility of making beautiful choices.
facciamo le dediche per
It's
adesso.
time for our dedications now. I thank everyone. Thank everyone for being together. Let's do the last Lam Rim dedications. Traditionally,
Cerchiamo di dedicare qualunque
they are recited, and we try to dedicate any positive karmic force that we've generated. We dedicate it to peace, to love, to joy, for the environment.
facciamo l'offerta del mandala.
Let's make the offering, the Mandala offering, for thanks.
Choshemeto Tramare Rabalingashe Nide Gempadi Sange Shinto Mikte Ulwarki Drokunam Tashingla Chopar Shoyidama Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniryatayami Ternir Ninto Bele Tsonyeni Katra Yamba Kanshe Sakpate Lomi Mare Dongdra Drowa Nama Namdren Gyawe Wangpo Dagyurchi Terma Songwe Tsera Kundu Yang Jambe Yange Tsewe Jesongne Tembe Rimpa Kunsa Lamge Che Nyene Drupe Gyalnama Nyeche Sho Range Chishin Tokpe Lamge Ne Shukdra Tsewe Trangpe Tabge Ki Drowe Yige Mumba Silche Ne Gyawe Tempa Yurin Zingur Che Tempa Rinchen Choge Makya Pam Kyapkyan Nyambra Gyurwe Chokter Ni Ninje Chimbo Yiraba Kyop Pende terte selwara chebar sho seche gyawe mechon chinglele lektro chancho lamge rimpe kyang tarde namge yila pelter shin gyawe tsepa ringdo kyongyur chi lamsan drupe tungen drupche ching Geken seche mida mimi kun tsera kunto gyawe ngakba ye namda lamdan chalwar margyur chi kanse tekpa chogla che che chu tsulshin drubla tsumpa te itse tute namge takto chokche ching trashi gyatso chokun kyab kyur chi chetsun lame kutse rapten namkar tinle chokchur gepa dang losan tempe drume sas drowe munsela takto ne gyur chi nimo dele tsende Delek pe kuncho sumki chingi lob, kuncho sumki ngodrubo tsol, kuncho sumki trashi sho. Al-alba,
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
at dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Grazie.
Thank you, everyone. Tomorrow morning, we have teachings.
Tutto qui.
Okay,
Grazie a tutti.
that's it. Thank you, everyone. Just for information, those of you who are at Milan, on Tuesday morning, there will be teachings of the Daksan Shakta. They will do it on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, Wednesday there'll be teachings, but then I need to go. I need to go to Rome after teachings. So,
Chi vuole andare in Olanda, weekend prossimo ci sono insegnamenti.
and next weekend there'll be teachings in Holland. Actually, I'll be in Rome. So if the plane is on time, I'll be on time for teachings in Milan.